So on to today's topic of with courage, you can do anything. And what we've been doing since the beginning of the year after we selected our theme for the year to be a vessel for transformation is we merged the 12 steps of AA along with 12 promises and combined them with 12 spiritual principles of New Thought along with 12 action steps. So last week we looked at that powerful step of made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And I'm sure everyone that was here last week went home and Sunday afternoon started the list. And you've been working on it tirelessly, unceasingly since. Correct? Bob's pulling his out of his pocket. Way to go, Bob. So if you've never thought of writing down a moral inventory of yourself, maybe this upcoming week would be a great time to do it. Because one of the reasons or hesitancies that we stop from doing it is because we don't want to always emphasize or put into action that important spiritual principle called courage. Because you see, it takes a real courageous heart to want to really look inside and go, wow, here is my moral inventory. And what is a moral inventory? A good way to look at it, the way I spoke about it last week, is it's looking at all the times in our lives that perhaps we did not magnify or amplify Spirit God. So if you were to ask yourself this last week, if you look back, through this last 166 hours since we were last together, for those of you that were here last week, is we look back and we go, okay, here's all the times that I amplified God. How do we amplify God? We're really loving. That when that energy flows into us of joy, that when it comes out of us, we're even more joyful. So how many of you had so much love, joy, happiness, enthusiasm, passion, excitement going on that if you lived in an apartment, the neighbors would have been banging on your wall to tell you to tone it down? So where was your volume on how you were amplifying God this last week? Or was it down so low that you couldn't hear it with a hearing aid? A good one. They're getting good now. Anybody that has a hearing aid, you got to be aware of it. People across the room can hear. They can hear you. They hear you when you just barely with. So look at how did you amplify. Maybe you were critical this last week and judgmental and condemning and harsh on others. So it's those times in our life that we're not amplifying or magnifying the beauty that resides within us. And then if we start looking back in our whole life of all the times that we didn't magnify and amplify, would we have a little bit of a list? Now you see what many of us do, the purpose of writing that list is to get it outside of your head and off of your heart. Because when you carry it inside of your head and on your heart, it starts to weigh you down. What is that weight like? It can show up physically in our body. It can show up as stress. It can show up in many forms of illness or dis-ease. It can show up in anxiety. It can show up in depression. It can show up in a multitude of ways when we allow ourselves to carry this stuff that weighs us down. So what it's saying here is, what the 12-step process is maybe whenever we have practiced in our life an unhealthy behavior, an unhealthy habit, an unhealthy addiction that we can't stop today and never do again, that when we've practiced those, sometimes by doing them, they have caused our self-harm, those around us, or our community at large harm, or hurt them in some way. And so what this step is about is doing a close, moral, and fearless inventory of those times in our lives that perhaps we haven't always been about magnifying, amplifying, glorifying Spirit. Do I have anybody's attention yet? You're actually a pretty good-looking group this morning. That's nice. I like it. So today we want to look at courage and where that steps into our path of recovery, of reconnecting to the divinity of that which we are. And one of the most powerful spiritual principles that we use in New Thought that has been taught for 2,500 years or longer is a spiritual principle, fundamental truth, an origin from which positive change can occur. So by applying the spiritual principle of courage, we can look at and use it as a guideline that allows us to create transformation in our lives and improve our standard of living, our standard of well-being. So I want to look at an example of many spiritual principles is the screen that we put up many times in the last year and a half, our authentic, real, true self. These are many of those, almost every one of those are spiritual principles. And what our life here is on earth is about glorifying, magnifying, amplifying those qualities to a level that the neighbor next to us got to be banging on the wall to quiet it down, because our volume of exuding that authentic, real, true, loving self is so loud that it's disturbing, but in a good way. But in a good way. So this past week, how many times do we amplify these qualities? And you know what? Every time we do, oh boy, does it feel good. And those around us feel good when we're amplifying them. So these are the principles from which we receive our strength and courage to move onward in our quest for spiritual enlightenment, personal fulfillment, and positive growth. As we incorporate these principles into our daily lives, we gain awareness and become open-minded towards all values and virtues that free us from our non-supportive, addictive patterns and selfish behaviors. And again, those addictive patterns and selfish behaviors are anything that you cannot stop today that is causing harm to yourself or others. That's what we're looking at. And why is this over and over? Why are we spending a whole year looking at this? Because you cannot step into a place of enlightenment, of awakening, as long as you are producing or practicing a detrimental behavior. That's why. Do you think Buddha could have been the Buddha if it had been a practicing alcoholic for 30 years and denied it? If we're holding these people up as the standard upon which we are setting as the ideal way to express life, then we need to look at their behaviors, their practices, and knowing that they never said, what I can do, you don't have a chance because you are less than. All that I've known through all spiritual teachers, from Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, is what I can do, ye can do greater. Never, I'm it, you're nothing. No. So I want to ask you, and this is the big one around the courage. What would happen if we had the courage to unwrap ourselves from the lies that we have enshrouded ourselves within? Such as the lies of, I am not good enough. I am not lovable. I need your approval to feel okay about myself. What if those lies, has anyone ever told yourself that lie? And you believed it so long that you believe it's a truth. That every relationship you get into, you never feel quite worthy of it. Every relationship, friendship, or extended, lengthy, long-term friendships, love affairs, whatever they are that you're in, you end up believing that you are not a lovable person. That is a lie, and many of us have told ourselves those things since we were little children. We can never succeed. We're not worthy in some way. How many of us are still seeking approval from others, and those others are dead? And we're still seeking it. See, if we were wounded in childhood, we were forced to develop coping mechanisms. And it's hard to believe that every one of us in here wasn't wounded in some little matter or manner growing up in our childhood. We developed tools and skills in order to survive if we were wounded. And thus we became survivors. And there is no shame in surviving, because sometimes life just hurts. Lies are one of the easiest places for survivors to run to in their heads. They provide a place of safety, a place where one has to depend only on oneself. But it's a dark place inside these lies. Through applying the spiritual principle of courage, one can break through to the light of one's divine truth. And that is such a powerful statement there. The inside of these lies is a dark place. When we keep telling ourselves inside of one of those lies that we're not good, that we don't deserve good, that we are not lovable, that's a heavy, burdensome lie to live within. And that enshrouds us, and it casts a heaping amount of energy that just drains into our body, into our psyche, which is our spirit, our soul, our heart, and our mind, all wrapped together. And when we live in one of those lies, they do pull us into a place of darkness. Anybody ever had a moment of darkness in your life? Not just when the lights went out? How many of you have been in such a dark place that when the lights turn out, it actually feels brighter? This side of the room got it? I'll wait for this side over here. Lies become like a little fortress inside of us. They can feel safe and powerful. And through our little fortresses of lies, we try to run our life and manipulate others. We try to get others to believe in our lies through how we behave towards them, unconsciously many times. If we believe that we are unlovable, we do our best to make ourselves unlovable. If you don't have a whole list of people just lining up to love you, what I ask you is, are you lovable? Or are you so darn hard to be around for more than 5 minutes straight that it's really tough? The person has to have a drink. That's why they're here. But the fortress needs walls. And you want to know how you've been in a relationship, friendship, in a family with walls is intimacy was almost non-existent. I'm not talking about necessarily sexual, physical intimacy, but that can be included. But as far as emotional intimacy, it means you spent years with people that never praised you, that never encouraged you, that never inspired you, that never gave words of approval such as, I love you, I'm proud of you, I accept you, you're great, you're good. That's what it means to spend time with a person that has fortressed their lies around them. Have I spoke to anyone yet? These are the justifications for our lies. You know the ones. Like, you are doing this to protect someone you love. To keep from feeling pain. Whatever works, just so we feel okay about the lies we present to the world. Listen to this one. How many times have you not told somebody the truth because you made the assumption for them that they will be unable to handle the truth? One person. And that by telling them the truth, it would cause them more hurt and pain. You made that decision for them. So you feel justified in not telling the truth. This is one of the bold-faced lies we enshroud ourselves in. Because we are so wrapped up in this lie, we can't even see that we're doing it. And you want to know why we do this? Do you want to know what the truth is here? The truth is, the real reason we do not tell the truth is not because we're trying to save the other person from the pain. The real reason is we're afraid to deal with the emotions we might have to encounter, both from within ourselves and from the other person. If emotions scare you, we lie to protect ourselves, not the other person. Oh. You understand we could do a 30-week class on that, baby. Courage in recovery is a vital virtue that can bring about success, understanding, and inspiration. Courage establishes the possibility of better improving our reality. It clears a passage to explore new horizons, to stand up for those things in which we wish to achieve. It's the ability to achieve greatness in our lives. When we take a step resolutely forward, we are granted the strength and wisdom necessary to execute our wishes. We triumph over frustration and rise above our perceived limitations. We expand our awareness and acquire a fresh perspective, assured that God's Spirit will lead our way through our recovery. We gain a better understanding of purpose and direction, unafraid to move forward with a heightened sense of significance and self-consciousness. It is essential that we believe in ourselves and never lose faith in our ability to accomplish our goals while maintaining confidence and persistence. The courage that is within us through life, through the preciousness of life, is such a powerful principle, it can overcome what appears to be insurmountable odds. And also when we're at our most courageous moments, it often can open our greatest perception of life. I want to read to you a story that's titled simply, A Dad's Story. It says, on July 22nd, I was en route to Washington, D.C. for a business trip. It was all so very ordinary until we landed in Denver for a plane change. As I collected my belongings from the overhead bin, an announcement was made for Mr. Lloyd Glenn to seek the United Customer Service representative immediately. When I got off the plane, a solemn-faced young man came toward me and said, Mr. Glenn, there is an emergency at your home. I do not know what the emergency is or who is involved, but I'll take you to the phone so you can call the hospital. My heart was now pounding, but the will to be calm took over. Woodenly, I followed this stranger to the distant telephone where I called the number he gave me for the Mission Hospital. My call was put through to the trauma center where I learned that my 3-year-old son had been trapped underneath the automatic garage door in our home for several minutes, and that when my wife had found him, he was dead. CPR had been performed by a neighbor who is a doctor, and the paramedics had continued the treatment as Brian was transported to the hospital. By the time of my call, Brian was revived, and they believed that he would live. But they did not know how much damage had been done to his brain nor to his heart. They explained that the door had completely closed on his little sternum right over his heart. He had been severely crushed. After speaking with the medical staff, my wife sounded worried but not hysterical, and I took comfort in her calmness. The return flight to home lasted forever. But finally I arrived at the hospital 6 hours after the garage door had come down on my little boy. When I walked into the intensive care unit, nothing could have prepared me to see my little son laying so still on a great big bed with tubes and monitors everywhere. He was on a respirator. I glanced at my wife, who stood and tried to give me a reassuring smile. It all seemed like a terrible dream. I was filled in with the details and given a guarded prognosis. Brian was going to live with the preliminary tests indicated that his heart was okay. 2 miracles in and of themselves. But only time would tell if his brain received any damage. Throughout the seemingly endless hours, my wife was calm. She felt that Brian would eventually be all right. I hung on to her words and faith like a lifeline. All that night and the next day, Brian remained unconscious. It seemed like forever since I had left for my business trip the day before. Finally, at 2 o'clock that afternoon, our son regained consciousness and sat up, uttering the most beautiful words I have ever heard spoken. He said, "Daddy, hold me." And he reached for me with his little arms. By the next day, he was pronounced as having no neurological or physical deficits. And the story of his miraculous survival spread throughout the hospital. You cannot imagine, when we took Brian home, we felt reverence for the life and love of God that comes to those who brush death so closely. In the days that followed, there was a special spirit about our home. Our 2 older children were much closer to their little brother. My wife and I were much closer to each other. And all of us were very close as a whole family. Life took on a less stressful pace. Perspective seemed to be more focused, and balance much easier to gain and maintain. We felt deeply blessed. Our gratitude was truly profound. However, the story is not over. Almost a month later to the day of the accident, Brian awoke from his afternoon nap and sat down. "Sit down, Mommy. I have something to tell you." At this time in his life, Brian usually spoke in small phrases, so to say a large sentence surprised my wife. She sat down with him on his bed, and he began to tell this sacred and remarkable story. "Do you remember when I got stuck under the garage door?" the 3-year-old said to his mom. "Well, it was so heavy and it really hurt bad. I called to you, but you couldn't hear me. I started to cry, but then it hurt too bad, and then the birdies came. The birdies, my wife asked, puzzled. Yes, he replied. The birdies made a whooshing sound and flew into the garage. They took care of me. They did? Yes, he said. One of the birdies came and got you. She came to tell you. I got stuck under the door. The mom remembers a sweet, reverent feeling filling the room. The spirit was so strong and yet lighter than air. My wife realized that a 3-year-old had no concept of death and spirits. So he was referring to the beings who came to him from beyond as birdies, because they were up in the air like birds that fly. What did the birdies look like? She asked. Brian answered, they were so beautiful. They were dressed in white, all white. Some of them had green and white, but some of them had on just white. Did they say anything? Yes, he answered. They told me the baby would be all right. The baby? The wife asked in confusion. Brian answered, the baby laying on the garage floor. He went on, you came out and opened the garage door and ran to the baby. You told the baby to stay and not leave. My wife nearly collapsed upon hearing this, for she had indeed gone and knelt beside Brian's body and seeing his crushed chest whispered, don't leave us, Brian. Please stay if you can. As she listened to Brian telling her the words she had spoken, she realized that the spirit had left his body and was looking down from above on this little lifeless form. Then what happened, she asked. We went on a trip, the birdies and me. He said, far, far away. He grew agitated trying to say the things he didn't seem to have the words for. My wife tried to calm and comfort him and let him know it would be okay. He struggled with wanting to tell something that obviously was very important to him, but finding the words was difficult. We flew so fast up in the air. They're so pretty, Mommy, he added, and there are lots and lots of birdies. My wife was stunned. Into her mind, the sweet, comforting spirit enveloped her more soundly, but with an urgency she had never known before. Brian went on to tell her that the birdies had told him that he had to come back and tell everyone about the birdies. He said they brought him back to the house and that a big fire truck and an ambulance were there. A man was bringing the baby out on a white bed, and he tried to tell the man that the baby would be okay. Brian's story went on for an hour. He taught us that birdies were always with us, but we don't see them because we look with our eyes, and we don't hear them because we listen with our ears. But they are always there. You can only see them in here, and he put his hand over his heart. They whisper the things to help us do what is right because they love us so much. Brian continued stating, I have a plan, Mommy. You have a plan. Daddy has a plan. Everyone has a plan. We must all live our plan and keep our promises. The birdies help us do that because they love us so much. Do we have the courage to live our plan? Most of us are hesitant to exercise our muscle of courage, to want to know what our purpose is in life. Because if we know what it is, then it becomes even harder for us to live life without fulfilling our purpose. Do you know how far off many of us are from living our purpose? Think of what people do in this world that may not be about amplifying or magnifying their purpose for being sent here from wherever it is that we come from and wherever it is where we go when we leave here. Because we come here, we are these beautiful spirits. Somewhere on the other side, these beings of light, when we transition to this side, to this manifestation, we were not meant to leave behind our light and love and become whatever it is that we become. We have been here. We are not meant to leave behind our light and love and forget who we are. It takes courage to be willing to discover your true self. That's why I acknowledge you every week for having the courage to be here, to continue to look at yourself, to continue to discover yourself. Because oftentimes when we really explore ourselves, we find out that we are these magnificent people inside of us. How many of us have told ourselves the lies that we can't dance, that we can't paint, that we can't write, that we can't? All of us. How many of us have wrapped up so tight, hidden away our brilliance and our light? We built fortresses around it because it got hurt once or something before in our life, or a few times or many times. And we keep it fortressed up. I want to continue our growth here as a community, that we're fostering a space that our brilliance can come out and shine. We all have something just like that inside of us. And every time that it comes out in your past, at the moment, or your future, it simply amplifies the incredible presence that is deep within all of us. He kept that gift hidden away for who knows how long. He was working for God's sakes, driving a van at the day and delivering pizza at night. How many of us are doing things that aren't what we were sent here to do? That took courage to step out on the stage. That's what the courage that I'm asking us all to apply to our lives. To take courage and show up for who you truly are. Let us pray. Turning within to that divine energy, to that divine thing inside of us that is has the ability to well up inside of us and overcome, flow over, break outside of any limiting walls that we as human beings have placed across or around that divine higher power. And I'm affirming right now that that energy is moving through us in such a powerful way that those walls, those fortresses, those enclosures that we have resided within are tumbling down right now, and what is emerging out of us is a different person that walked in here an hour and a half ago. That we are stepping into our authentic, true, powerful spiritual expression of God, of love, so that we go forth in a way that amplifies the beauty that resides within us, and anything that has ever covered it up from another person's actions and behaviors and words and criticisms and emotions to any of those that we have placed within ourselves, our own negative thinking and behaviors and thoughts and emotions, that those are falling by the wayside, that this energy inside of us is rising up above and flowing over into the greatness and reminding us of our true, authentic, and real self. And that I'm affirming there is nothing contained in any of our limiting, self-serving egos that can prevent this behavior, this activity of God from occurring. And I am knowing that there is a strengthening that is taking place within us individually and collectively. That we are becoming more and more courageous each day to honestly look at ourselves. That when we see a weakness, we do not fear the weakness. We examine it with an open mind, with a loving heart, and we go, okay, there's an area that I need to change, to transform, to shift, to get strong in. That's how we become stronger as spiritual beings having a human experience, by examining closely, honestly, courageously our weaknesses and applying our higher power to them, and applying our human intellect and knowledge and wisdom and our heart's love to them to strengthen them, so that our weaknesses soon become our strengths. That's the transformation that is occurring here, and collectively we continue to foster the greatness that comes out of each other. For this and so much more, man, am I grateful to be a part of the Victoria Center for Inspired Living. On this day, I give thanks to each and every one of you for your hearts, for the softening of your hearts, and for the opening of your mind, and for the courage of that man singing for us. For this and so much more, may we join together collectively and simply say, to complete this prayer, Amen. Amen.